I'll start with you if you don't mind, John, because it's very rare we see you sitting here next to me answering questions. I mean, Tony's getting a bit of a dab hand at it now for all the appearances that we've done. But I want to roll the clock back a little bit, really, John, and talk to you about being a Stoke fan. Because you've been a Stoke fan. You've had a position of authority here as the vice chair for a long time. But as a Stoke fan, you feel the highs and the lows just like the rest of us on a Saturday night when we get home.
Yeah, certainly. So, I'm conscious I don't speak a lot at these sorts of events. I've historically tried to avoid them like the plague, if I'm honest. I've supported Stoke all my life. I went to my first match when I was 6. We played Ipswich Town. We beat them 2-1. I think I've been to 74 league grounds watching Stoke. I feel it when we lose. I feel it when we win. Obviously, I feel fantastic when we win. I've seen some dark days. Looking back on some memories. Blythe Spartans in '78. I think I was 8 years old, and I think that kind of showed me football could have some bad aspects to it. Obviously, I look back on some of the down times, Birmingham, when we lost 7-0, for all sorts of reasons that you'll probably appreciate, wasn't the best game I'd ever been to. But I've had some enormous highs. I'd say my favourite season, and I know it's not very original, but it would be 1992. I was a member of we lived in Sandbach at the time, and I was a member of the South Cheshire Supporters Club, and we had a coach that went from a local pub to every game. Richard Smith, who Denise's husband, was also a member of that organisation, if that's the right word for it. And that was great. We had the highs of last-minute winners at Hartlepool. Going back slightly, big highs, beating Peterborough away to get to the Autoglass Trophy final.
The trophy to win.
Well, I have very fond memories of that day because we'd had a bit of a nightmare on the coach because we were. I don't know whether you remember. I'm sure many of you do. The weather was really bad that day, and we were travelling down, and rather ironically, given the name of the trophy, the coach we was on, the front windows just came out, and so we're there. I don't know, about half an hour from Peterborough, thinking, "Christ, what do we do now?" And literally, the coach driver, I remember him having these quite thick glasses on, and we took it in turns at the front, wiping his glasses as
just to get you to the game.
No, to get us to the game, and it was great. And then a lad who sadly passed away now, Paul Ware, who quite a few of us were at school with, scored the winner with a free kick. Now, of course, Paul was a good footballer. He wasn't a great footballer, Paul wasn't, but he was a good, and he was a really, really good guy. And but when he stepped up to take the free kick, we were like, what's he doing? But the story, Lou tells a really good story of how that came to be. And when the team had travelled down, they were playing cards, and Paul just couldn't stop winning, and he just every hand just kept winning, and at the end of the trip, Lou just turns to him. He says, "Right, penalties, free kicks, Paul, you're on him." and anyway, that's it.
Brilliant. Let me drag you a bit further, nearer home, because obviously your times watching Stoke early on were very much as a fan and being able to appreciate that home and away feeling on the terraces. Let's bring you to I perhaps harp on about this a bit too much, but that promotion season that we got up, You were obviously then, your role had changed slightly. You were seeing things from the other side a lot more than perhaps you'd done previously.
Yeah.
How was that roller coaster season?
I think it's different, and it's not necessarily for the best. I have to say, no, it isn't. You feel this sense of responsibility. Yeah, look. I absolutely appreciate. Everybody feels, after a game, elated if you've won, down if you lose. But it's when you're in that other position, you just feel so responsible. Yeah, and I think maybe I'd be honest, you don't enjoy it quite the same because you're worried. You're just thinking, all right, okay, that's instead of really enjoying the high when you win, you're almost going, oh, right, okay, what does that mean?
Sort of second guessing what's coming.
Yeah, okay, right, we've got to go again, and yeah. So but clearly that season was great for a couple of reasons. Obviously, promotion was pretty good. Also, I took my son to his first game during that season, so. I remember I took him. It was towards the end. He was still quite young, and I took him to the Bristol City game when we won 2-0. And one of my favourite players was Mama Sidibe, and he. I remember him going through, and Stan, my lad, Stan, just going up like this, and because it was Mama, I kind of tapped in, or I sort of Stan. Yeah. Don't get too excited. It's all right. And
lots of people in the audience used to think that as well.
No. I'm sure. I'm just. Anyway, it was great. Yeah.
Good. And you talk about that pressure, John. I'm gonna throw over to Tony now, and we talk about pressure. You've been the chief executive here for a long number of years now, Tony. And I've got a question here that came in on email, so I'm going to hit you with this one first to ease you in before we open it up to the floor. What have the last 18 months been like for you here at the club, Tony? And how difficult has the club, the handling of the transition from Premier League to Championship football? You spent most of your career in football, running football clubs. Would you say that this has perhaps been one of the toughest periods in your footballing career?
We're not past 9 o'clock, are we?
No, careful, we've got kids in. Sorry to start with such a small question for you.
Yeah, without a doubt, Steve. It's let's be honest about it. John's talked about how you feel as fans, how you feel when you feel responsible for it. I mean, that the word I'd use when we win is relief. It's you want to be overjoyed, you want to be happy, but your overwhelming feeling is relief that you've won the game. And of course, when you get beat, you feel hideous. So we've lost quite a lot of games over the last 18 months. So you feel pretty bad after every defeat, and then of course it becomes cumulative. And we've had a pretty poor couple of years, haven't we? So is it the hardest time? Certainly in my time in football. Before that as well, though, it's without doubt the hardest time in my career, and it affects everything, of course. But what you have to do, you get relegated, and you look at what you've got, and you try and make an honest assessment of where you went wrong, the mistakes that you've made, what you're responsible for. You look around also at the team you've got and the club that we've got, and the truth is, Steve, you dust yourself down. You dust yourself down pretty quickly, and to use John's words a moment ago, you have to get ready to go again. Go again over the summer, getting ready. And although it can be difficult to see at times when you're not getting the results that you want, you look around you and you see good people, and you think, we're a great club. We're a great club going through a difficult period, but you have to believe, which we do, that we'll come out of it.
I mean, we, both yourself and Mr. Coates Senior, as we'll call him, Peter the C, came out with Tony and the management team at the football club last summer with a statement of we're going to make some changes, but also very much so that we're here, we're keeping what resource we've got, and we're going to go on and fight for it. How how much of a different summer did you have perhaps this year as a management team than the previous 10 years? What did you have to do differently last summer that we've perhaps not done in previous summers?
I guess in many senses we did the same thing, because every summer you look at what you've got and you look to improve on the last year. So even when we had good years, finishing 9th in the Premier League, we still look to improve the following year. And the summer's the time that you put your plans in place, and that includes buying and selling players, or you put your plans in place in terms of the structures around the club as well. Now, obviously, last summer we'd been relegated, so in terms of the changes that needed to be made to improve, they were a lot more substantial than in previous years. And one of the big changes, of course, we made was we changed the manager and the management team again for the second time in 6 months. And the truth is that there's a lot of work involved in doing that, as you would imagine, but then there's an incredible amount of work once you've done that, because a new manager comes in and has his own thoughts, has his own ideas, has his own plans, which we try to support him with. So, in one sense, whilst we were doing the same things, we were getting ready for the season. Given the season we'd had before, clearly it was a huge amount more than we'd done in previous years.
Very good, right. You're all being very well behaved, listening. I like that. Have we got some microphones? And I think if we'll do a hand in the air, if that's okay with everybody, we'll try and spot you. Paul on the front first, then we'll come to Malcolm second. So if we come to Paul on the front, and then we'll go to Malcolm. So, excuse me if I don't know everybody's name, but I can't not help but know his name. Paul, who's your question to?
It's to Tony, primarily. Just to pick on something you just said. Last summer, you had some thinking to do. I think it came out in the press that you were going to do a review of what went wrong and things are going to change. I realise some of that's going to be kept behind closed doors. Is there anything you have shared with fans or anything you'd like to share with us now?
Yeah. Well, what we did was look at everything to do with the season. Look at where we'd arrived at. We'd arrived in a bad place, and you have to identify the reasons for that. Some of it was circumstantial. Some of it was based on decisions that we'd made, based on decisions that I made, and you have to. When you identify those things, you have to accept them and take the responsibility for it as well. You then look at what you can improve on that going forward, and across the piece we tried to do that. I think perhaps the most sort of evident way I can sort of say about changes is we were criticised quite extensively, really, for the appointment of Paul Lambert last January. And the time it took. And in football, we recognise that, I mean, at the time, being blunt with you, I thought the criticism was very unfair, partly because we're working 24 hours a day on it. We were doing everything within our power to do that as quickly as we could. And we said that we would have somebody in place prior to the Huddersfield game, would it be? Whichever game, which we did. But nevertheless, football now in the modern world, it's 24 hours a day, it's constant. So we looked at that and so what could, next time round, we hope it's a few years away, but next time round, what could we do better, what could we do quicker? And unfortunately, the next time round came a lot quicker than any of us would have chosen to. And I think if you have a look at what you can see publicly about that, and I'm talking obviously about Gary going, the timing of Gary going and then Nathan coming in, and if you compare it to the previous year when Mark went, you'll see a lot of differences.
Answer your question, Paul? Good. Come back with part two later. Malcolm.
Yeah. Who do you think was responsible for our relegation?
Do you want me to say that first, or? No.
I think when things go wrong, it's really easy to kind of want to blame just one person or one thing. I think when you look back on and hindsight's that most wonderful of vantage points, you look back on what would you have done differently, and I'm sure there's things Tony wishes he'd done differently. things I wish I'd have done differently. The rest of the you look at everything and think, what could I have done differently that would have given you a different outcome? And don't forget, most of the people making those decisions were all, to be fair to them, were also there during the 10 years before, which had been highly successful. But you look and you analyse and all you can do is go, okay, we have been relegated. What have we learnt from that, and what can we do within our power to make us successful again? And that's what I'm focused on, and that's what we're focused on. Is we've had 10 very, very successful years, followed by 2, frankly, very poor years. And we've got to find a way to arrest that decline and make us successful again. And that's absolutely what we're focused on. We've got what we believe is a really good young manager in Nathan Jones. He's passionate, he's articulate, he is, we believe, a great prospect as a football manager. We think if we can give him the right support, he'll be very successful with us. Tony, do you want
to add anything to that, Tony, or you?
No, I think John's covered. I think the only thing I'd add to it to answer the directly who's responsible, and we talked about it when Mark went, and we talked about it with all the squad of players as well. So all of us who didn't go, if you like, on the day that Mark and his team went, and we all talked together and agreed that whilst Mark had gone and his team had gone, and therefore he was carrying a bigger element of the responsibility publicly, we were all to blame. And every single one of the players agreed with that, all the staff agreed with that. And so to take John's answer, really, when things go as badly wrong as they did for us, we are all to blame to a greater or lesser degree.
Thanks for your question, Malcolm. Have we got hands up anywhere? You can. I'll come to you secondly. We'll go to the front here, Fraser, if we can. And then we'll go over there, Aid. Thank you. That gentleman there.
Probably for Tony. Our favourite question, Paul and I, at this time of year is, please, can you help us where pre-season is? And as an aside, am I correct in thinking the under-23s aren't going to Hong Kong?
You normally tell us.
Should I give you the answer I normally give you at this time of year as well? Yes. We will give you the plans. Let me just explain a bit. And Caroline, I've had this conversation with you many times. We want to let everybody know as soon as we possibly can about all of our plans, so that you can plan your holiday, book your flights, etc. What we don't want to do, and it happened once in the past, and it was hugely embarrassing for the club, and it was wrong, is we announced plans for something. A couple of supporters spent a lot of money on following on those plans, and then we cancelled them. And so what we don't want to do is to announce it before we're sure about it. What can I say? All I can say is expectation at the moment, because, we will, I think, but please don't take this as definite, we will be spending a week in Europe in a training camp, and I think the rest of the time we'll spend here. So there won't be as much of a foreign element to pre-season as there has perhaps been over the last few years.
So, Caroline, what that means is you just need to book Travel Lodge in Newcastle under Lyme and you're good. You won't miss that fixture.
As soon as we're able to, Caroline, we will let you know.
OK, we're down here in the corner.
Hi, my question is, you both stated that you learned something from relegation. My question specifically, what did you learn from relegation? What specifics, rather than sort of generalities,
You can have half each on this one if you want to.
Tony.
It's actually a really difficult question to answer in terms of what to say publicly, if I'm honest. But let me, and there's a danger by trying to answer it that you'll say, well, you haven't really answered the question directly. You've just given generalisations. But bear with me, and I'll talk as much as I can. That if we look at last season, yeah, it is still last season, and what went wrong. Things went wrong. And sorry, if we go back further to the summer before the season started, and what we were looking to do, and we'd finished the previous season with not the best form. We'd had a difficult last 9 games in terms of the results that we'd got, and that included a couple of heavy defeats to teams in the Big Six. However, I think we finished 13th, 2 points off 8th place, including a win last day of the season away at Southampton. And just as an aside, I was amazed on that day, I know many of you will have been there, at how much booing there was at Southampton with regard to their manager at the time. It's because when you're not at a club, you don't sort of recognise the issues that other clubs have got. But anyway, that's across the piece in football now. So we went into that summer, 2 points off 8th place. Previous 3 years, of course, we'd finished 9th. And we always had that question, which, as I said earlier on, we do every year. How do we improve? How do we take it one step further? And of course, you guys, understandably, are saying, what are we doing to push further into the top 10? What are we doing to improve on the 9th place? Are we going to try and push into the top 6? And what we've always done is try to have a measured but ambitious approach to strengthening. And we did that summer. And this is what I'm about to say is a view we all have, but obviously, because I'm speaking, there's going to be a personal sort of emphasis on certain things. The players that we recruited during that summer were not collectively able to deal with the demands of the season as it turned out. So to put that another way, we got ourselves into a relegation fight, and we didn't have the characters in the squad to deal with that relegation fight. What we don't know, none of us in this room, because it's impossible to say, is had we had a different start to the season and we were in the top 10, how would some of those characters then have performed? And so, if you take those two things, I think one of the things I'd say straight away is we allowed the balance of the squad to move too far in one direction because we were trying to get players who undoubted ability to perform at the top level, but as the events turned out, didn't have the character that you require to perform when you're in a different kind of contest. And so what did we learn? To the point, we learned, and as much as anything, it was a big reminder, a big sort of, slap yourself about the face, it was a reminder, balance is so important in the squad.
Well done. Thank you for that question. Right, we are with Adrian over there. Gentlemen.
It's about Jack Butland, really, this is. When you get Jack Butland, obviously a lot of talk going that he's going to leave the club this summer. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But my reason is saying, if you're going to sell Jack Butland, please don't do what you've done in the past and let players go for peanuts. And then when we sell players, like when we sold Stephen Nzonzi, went for about £7 million, but then we go and pay the top whack. When we are buying, we pay top whack. Now, whether that's because they think that the club's financially sound, but like I say, the people we bought this summer, like Kevin Vimmer for 18 million and Bueller, Jack Butland going. If Jack Butland's going, we've got to sell Jack Butland for the right price. I mean, Jordan Pickford's went for 30 million. Chelsea have just paid 73 million for a goalkeeper. We cannot let Jack Butland go because Jack Butland, at the moment, I think, is the only asset we've got in our club. And I think if we're going to sell Jack Butland, he must go for top whack. And if we don't, Well, he gives up. We might as well give up because I think we can't afford to keep letting our players go for nothing. And I'm going back to when Mike Pedgett was here, when he went to Everton. Mike Pedgett went for peanuts, but when we go for buy a player, we always seem to pay over the odds for him.
Thank you for your question. Probably, would it be appropriate for you to... Obviously, everybody wants top whack for a player. So how would you go through that process of evaluating what a player's worth, and then how do you end up doing a deal? Take Jack out of the equation, just generally with transfers and comings and goings. How would you decide a market value for a player?
Well, the first thing you'd look at, certainly if you're talking about selling a player, is whether or not you want him to go. And every player, how can I put this? You've got players who are valuable to your team, and if you're trying to build something, you're trying to improve upon it, you don't want to lose those players that are valuable to your team. And I think if you look at us over the last several years, we've never been a club that has sold our better players with free will. So some of the sales that one or two that you mentioned there, we're really selling against our will because of the contract situation where the player is, and that obviously has a huge effect on the value of the player as well. So in terms of how you value a player, the simple answer is that the market will decide what you want. If you're in a situation where you're going to sell a player and you've made that decision, you want 2, 3, 4 of the biggest clubs you can find all bidding against each other for that player, because that drives the price up. If you know you've got to sell a player and you've only got one potential buyer and it's not a particularly big club, that has the opposite effect. That's going to drive the price down as well. So, number of factors.
There's one point I'd probably make, and some of this might sound counterintuitive, but hear me out on it. Because of the fortunate financial position that we found ourselves in as a family, and because of our absolute desire for Stoke to be successful, there have been times over the period where we've turned down offers for players that really, rationally, business-wise, you would have just taken. They were, and we've done that because we want the club to be successful. But clearly, by doing that, it actually sometimes seems like you're not doing great business. And probably rationally, business-wise, we probably not haven't done that sometimes in the past. But part of the reason has been not wanting to, being probably the fault of being a fan and an owner. You don't want your best players to go.
Can I just jump in one moment, John? John and I have had direct conversations where we've had a bid in for a player, and as you'll all appreciate, if we get a sizable bid for a player, I have to go to the owners with that and say, you've an opportunity here. What do you think? And almost before I've said how much, John's turned to me and said, "We're not selling him." End of. We're not selling him.
That must be, for you, that must be so difficult, John, because that's like playing Football Manager with your own team, isn't it?
Look, I've got some of it wrong on that. There are times when we should have sold. Yeah, and I've been absolutely responsible for that, but it's been done with the absolute best of intentions.
Keep our best.
No. I'm saying, me, Dad, Denise, Richard. Sometimes that's not been the right thing to do, and I know that. Yeah, it's hard though. If you can imagine being in that situation, it's you don't want to sell. You don't want to sell your best players. Yeah.
But from a business point of view, it's the opposite, really.
It maybe should have been the right thing to do, and then reinvest that money in a younger hungrier. I'm not saying that the player wasn't. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes it's been the wrong thing. Yeah, and we've got to learn from that and make sure, absolutely we run the club as fans who are in a very fortunate position, but also make sure we do what's absolute best for the club. Yeah.
Okay, got one there with Adrian. Adrian.
No, I was just going to, support what John has just said, because if I remember correctly, every single summer of Stephen Nzonzi's contract, he put a transfer request in, didn't he? So I would imagine that, going from that logic, he'd have gone on the first transfer request if a big offer had come in. So, John, that shows you're a fan, and I thank you for that, for turning him down.
Okay, we're at the back there, and then we'll come back to Malcolm in a minute, Fraser, if we... Got the one at the back.
I just want to ask whether or not you think that the club are currently hampered by mental obstacles due to higher expectations, fear of failure, and if so, what can the club do to resolve that?
Do you mean when you say... Do you mean that the pressure of being perceived to be one of the bigger clubs in the division and the expectation, or?
I think there is. I think there's expectation from us on the terraces to you at the boardroom, and I think that's manifesting itself on the pitch. The penalty situation, for example.
I think you make an absolutely fair point that with weight of expectation is a difficult thing for players to deal with. Absolutely, it is. What we've got to ensure is that we bring when we're bringing players into the club, that we bring players who we think can, in time handle that expectation, embrace that expectation, and. That's the only way you can be successful with that. But you're absolutely right. There's a pressure of expectation, and clearly, we all try and help with that, and in encouraging the team to do well, and hopefully we can get over that.
Yeah, I think it's a very fair question because mainly the reality is when we started this season, we were seen as one of the biggest clubs, one of the favourites for promotion, a budget that went with that, spent significantly over the summer, both in terms of transfer fees but also wages, and the reality is that then does put an expectation on everybody and some pressure as well. And as John's saying there, it's making sure that you create an environment where that pressure isn't undue. Yeah, the reality is it will exist, and most of it is self-imposed by people. But you try and create an environment where it's not undue pressure. And you try and ensure that the people who you've got are people who are able to deal with that. It's an old cliche really. Some players can play at big clubs, others can't. And I'm not saying using ourselves in that regard. It tends to be used when you talk about the big clubs at the top of the Premier League. And the other thing, of course, is the teams that we were playing early on in the season. That there's no doubt when we were going there, teams were raising their game to play against us. And I got thoroughly fed up after a month. Every team we seemed to be playing, after the game, after they'd beaten us, were telling us it's the best they'd played in 3 years, and it seemed to be a recurring thing. But the expectation's there. It's going to stay there because of who we are in this division, and it's about making sure that the people are the right people to deal with it.
Yeah, would we work with sports psychologists at all in that aspect to try and, get players through, a poor period?
we've got a sports psychologist employed at the club, but we, and this goes across all that we do really, we allow the manager to decide how much he and his team and the players tap into that, and also tap into external resource as well. There's no end of external resource. I'll probably get a letter a week from people offering their services for sports psychology and other things. But it's some managers like to bring in external resource, others like to keep it within the group.
Medium what? I was going to say. We actually had a question that I got written out, didn't I? I've got your question somewhere here. Do you want to... No, it's not yours. It's a friend of yours, wasn't it? Friend of yours question. Wants to know, in the world where we live in a world of inclusion and we do so much for disabled access, would we consider him having a start up front with his go-kart? 8 miles an hour. 8 mile an hour. He reckons he could do a job up front for us. Cheap-ish. Right, phrase, Malcolm, thank you.
There's clearly some turmoil at the Football League at the moment with the departure of the chief executive and the unlikeliness of the interim chair carrying on. Stoke City have been identified in the media as one of the clubs who've been pressing for significant change. Is that true? And if it is, what exactly are you pressing for and what are the reasons for it?
Yes, it's true. That's probably the starting point for this answer. Yes, it's true. We were surprised when we came into the division at the level of disquiet there was from a number of clubs in this league with regard to how the Football League, the executive, the board were handling their affairs. Very surprised at how unhappy all clubs were. That then manifested itself, or that then escalated when the league board signed the new broadcasting deal with Sky. And this is in the public domain, against the will and against the expressed request of the vast majority of clubs in this division. So, that being the case, as we looked at it and we looked at the governance around it and we looked at the judgment behind the decisions that were made, as a club that's now a member of this division, then yes, we weren't happy with how events had come to pass either. And so it's fair to say we've been as vocal as we believe we should be in expressing our opinions and views.
And I don't think that expressing an opinion, is something that you did in the Premier League, with the way that you conducted your business as one of 20 clubs. I don't think that changed.
Yeah, we as a club, I guess, Malcolm, the reason why you asked the question the way you did is we're not a club that goes running to the media. We don't run and say, here's what we're doing, or put leaks out there or anything, as a number of others do. But we do play our part, and as a Premier League or the Football League, and we do argue for what we think is right for football, for the league, but most particularly for this football club.
Good stuff. You got a...
Panicking here. Oh, hey, right. Just a more positive thing though, because I grew up thinking that we'd never get the Premiership, and we got the Premiership, and it's fantastic, and we come down now. But you got to say, it's damn sight more exciting now, isn't it? Now we've come down again and we're getting back up. I'm just thinking your views on that. Whether you find it really blinking exciting. It's great.
Yeah. I hear what you're saying. I don't quite agree. No, I think part of the issue with being in the Premier League is I agree. I never thought we'd be there either. Yeah, I grew up watching us, meander between the second tier and the third tier. Yeah, and we got to the Premier League and it was unbelievable. It was unbelievable, and those first few years in the Premier League were unbelievable. I understand what you're saying is because of the structure of the Premier League and because it is so dominated by 6 clubs, you kind of start the season and you're thinking, right, you know, let's try and finish 10th, you know, and that doesn't sound the most exciting thing sometimes, yeah, but you know what you've got to aspire to, I think, in the Premier League is as good a finish as you can, but then try and get good cup runs. I think they're essential because what we all want that sense that we can go for glory. You know, that sense of real massive achievement. Yeah, I get what you're saying, and some of my friends who've been supporting Stoke a long time and have used to, you know, they were saying, oh no, we've gone down, but at least we might win some games. And, yeah. Unfortunately, this season hasn't quite panned out quite as the way we.
I bet you love going for a drink with them friends
now,
don't you, John?
They're an absolute bundle of laughs. No, look, if next season we can have, you know, a good season, have a really good go at trying to get promoted, you know, clearly. The excitement of it brings a different form of excitement. Yeah.
Certainly does. I think Adrian is somewhere. I can't quite see him, but I know he's over there with a microphone. He's at the back there. Adrian, with you.
It's me now. Okay. Hello, good evening. First of all, I want to say you're very brave for coming and doing this tonight. It should happen more often, to be honest. But my question links to what you've already said about transfers, which to me is the reason why we're where we are, because we haven't done it very well, to be honest. But have you actually, as a board, looked at how we were signing players, not just on ability, but character, as you mentioned earlier, and amended on what you're doing, really, to make it different going forward? So you talked a bit about character. There are ways of assessing character with individuals, because you can have the best player in the world, but if he hasn't got the right character and the right make-up in his psyche, he'll never be a great player for a football club. So have you really amended and thought as a board how we can make it better going forward?
I think you've got to believe me when I say you think of little else as to how you can get better at things, and what are those. What can you add? What process can you add in that will make you better at, you know, assessing a player, the structure of it, how your scouting system works, how those reports get done, how the manager assesses his squad, what type of player he wants, both in terms of, I mean, and to be fair, you know, with Nathan, obviously it's early days. Nathan will have a very clear idea on, for example, what he wants from, say, you know, a right back. You know, he knows he wants a right back to, you know, have these qualities, and you're absolutely right. One of them will be about his character and the assessment of his character, and that will only help us get better at it. Because when the manager's got a very clear idea of what he wants in each position, clearly the more detail he can go into, the better your scouting can be, and the better the options can be that are put forward in front of him, that he ultimately assesses as to whether they're the right player for this football club.
Thanks, John. Fraser.
We often talk about recruitment, player recruitment. The other side of the coin, of course, is moving players on that are no longer in the plans of the manager. Could you say something about the process that involves? And secondly, sometimes that will be unsuccessful, and how do you manage the fractured relationship that could therefore create between staff and player?
It's the hardest part of the job. Is the selling players or move. If you've got to the point where you're moving players on, so you've effectively determined that they're surplus to your requirements, they're not right for the squad under that manager at that time, they're not right. It's the hardest part, because you can't force anybody to take one of your players against their will. And it becomes a little bit of bluff and counter bluff, of course, because you don't want other teams to think that actually you're quite keen on selling a player, because that has a, as you'll all understand, I'm sure, that depresses the market value significantly. So it's a matter of doing your work, and I suppose what I would say to is you get people to do that job for you, so that people let the industry know, let other clubs know that a player X might be available. So it then enables me or us as a club, when that club comes on to you, you've got a more of a fighting chance in terms of negotiation than if you'd phone them up yourself and said, how do you fancy X? So in terms of saying what the set process is, no, I can't, because there isn't a set process. But depending on the individual player, and your keenness to sell them. Now, you'll all have a few in your minds that Ideal World will move on this summer, and the market knows that. So that has, back to the point someone raised earlier on, the market knows that we're keen to move a few players on, and that has a depressing effect on their value. We know that. So when the market knows we're keen to move a player on, we can be much more proactive in terms of contacting clubs, contacting agents to identify which clubs might need a particular player, which countries they might be suited to. But when the market doesn't know, then you tend to have to go through a backdoor route. Does that answer your question as much as I can? Okay.
I always think the fractured relationship, if indeed there is one, I think is often a quality your manager has to have, and that's a quality any manager has to have. Certainly at a football club, if you've got a squad of every football club might have a squad of say 25 players, those players who are not in the side, who are not playing regularly, are often unhappy. Yeah, and the one of the qualities a manager has to have, and they all do it in different ways, is being able to manage that situation and try and keep as many of that squad engaged so that they feel part of that squad and feel part of the team, so that if and when called upon, they're there ready to play their part, but also that they don't negatively detract from the group that is playing.
With Adrian, I think, next, aren't we? Adrian, then Fraser will come to one of the gents with his hands up. Adrian?
Brexit. Right.
Dorman.
Well, there's a restriction on how many players you can bring in from non-European countries. When we come out, well, we're near enough there now, well, how will that affect us on buying and selling of players in Europe, please?
It depends somewhat on what the situation, what the legal situation is going forward. Because just because clearly, if Brexit went in a no deal scenario, you'd then fall back on the international rules for players. For non-EU players.
No, that's exactly it. The default position is that the worldwide football transfer position is that, players from around the world coming into the UK have to abide by the rules and the criteria that the Home Office put in place in conjunction with discussions with the FA and the leagues. Now, European players have been an exception to that while we're in the EU because of freedom of movement of workers. So the default position is that exception disappears, and European players coming into the club or into the league will follow the same rules as worldwide players. So if you look yourselves and just sort of do the analysis, how many non-EU players play in the Football League, let's say, versus EU players, and the numbers massively lower. So the net effect will be, if there's no other arrangements put in place, if we go to the default, the net effect will be that there will be a significant reduction in the number of European players.
Let's not wait for the government. Otherwise we'll be here all night. Right, where are we going next? This gentleman here's got a microphone.
Yeah. Paul, we've had a miserable couple of seasons, but I do think the club should be congratulated in the fact they've kept season ticket prices down now for more than 10 years, and also the provision of free away transport for fans for every league game. I think that deserves a bit of applause for what they've done there. That wasn't my question, by the way. The fact you've this time last year we've got Paul Lambert as a manager. I don't think really we saw him as the man to take us forward. We never thought at the time possibly Garrett Rowe would be picked, but he was a young up-and-coming manager. He'd done well at his previous clubs. We all thought he'd be the real deal. You've picked a left field appointment in Nathan Jones. How quickly did you decide over the Christmas period that Gary was not the man to take us forward, and to pick a man like Nathan Jones, who I've got a lot of admiration for, and we all hope he does succeed? How did he come to that decision? Are you able to tell us?
I'll take the second half of the question first, yeah? Okay, with Nathan. Okay. Nathan had certainly been on my radar for a couple of years. Bizarrely, a very good friend of mine had met him in a pub after. No, I'll tell you the story because it's quite interesting. And he was about a year into managing Luton and started to do well, yeah. And very good friend of mine who goes to watch. He goes to watch about 3 games a week all over the country. He's addicted to watching football, and he came into the office one day. When we first started the business, when Denise and I were in a porter cabin at the back of one of the betting shops in Longton, and Bet365 was just starting out, this guy had joined us. He was one of the first 25 who was working in those porter cabins, and he joined us as a trader. And to be honest, he didn't quite make it as a trader, but he ended up staying and still works for us now. Fanatical football guy. Anyway, he'd gone to watch Luton play. Why you'd do that midweek, I don't know. But he then came into my office. He'd then seen Nathan after the game, started talking to him, and he came into the office. He says, "John," he said, "I met Nathan Jones last night." He said, "You'd love him. You'd absolutely love him." He said, he's just immersed in football. He just talks the game." And so he was on our radar, and we were all kind of, I relayed this conversation. I had a chat with, just because you talk football with everybody, I chatted to Dad about it. I said, Steve said he met Nathan Jones, and chatted to Tony about it. And anyway, so he was on our radar a bit, and we were watching his career and seeing the Luton side he'd produced, and it was not only were they doing well, but they were also, they were playing quite an interesting brand of football. They were playing a diamond, and not a lot of people were playing a diamond in that division at the time, and sometimes switching it a bit. And you start to look at somebody, you think, well, actually, that's somebody who's thinking quite deeply about the game and is willing to try different things. And they were scoring goals, and obviously everybody has them down as a very attacking side. But if you actually looked at some of the defensive qualities and one or two of the players they brought in, such as like Sonny Bradley, who you know, I hadn't quite seen at that level, and he'd done really well. And you're thinking, well, he's bringing those players on well. So he was on our radar, yeah. So when we came to make the change, we, you know, I remember the conversation. We were stood having a chat. Me, Dad, Tony, and Richard Smith, and I'll be honest. It was we'd said a few names. I'll be honest. I said, well, you know, what about Nathan Jones? And we agreed the right thing to do was to see him. Yeah, and we saw him, and you just, I mean, at 365 now. I don't, because of the way the business has grown. Yeah, which has been more than I ever kind of imagined it would. But yeah, I don't. I used to interview a lot of people, you know, but I do it less now. Yeah, but sometimes you're there having an interview, and sometimes you're just with somebody and you get a feel and you think, oh, you know, this is right. This is right. You know, he had great passion for the game, but also a very, very clear mind as to what he wanted, how he wanted to play, how he thought he could improve us, had done a colossal amount of homework in a very, very short period of time on our club. You know, he walked in, he knew, you know, I could have gone, what do you think about such and such? And he'd have gone, well, I've seen him 3 times this year, and in that game I thought maybe he was a bit short in these areas, and you know, and you feel sometimes that this is a bright young manager to take us forward. Now we're all realistic. You know, he's a young manager, and you guys as well, hopefully, but we certainly have got to give them the support and the time, because, you know, he'll encounter difficulties at times, but we absolutely believe that he was the right choice. I still absolutely believe he was the right choice, and I'm really, really hopeful that he'll bring us success. Sorry, that was quite a long-winded...
Got one with Adrian, and then we'll come to the front.
This is the question I was going to ask, but before I mentioned Jack Butland. As a management, what do you think about the Glenn Johnson interview on Talk Sport?
We've done well. We've been here an hour before.
I'll give you an honest answer. Yeah. You'll get an honest answer. I'm going to give an introduction to it, though. Whenever you hear interviews, whenever you read articles, it can often pay to sort of think why someone's saying what they're saying. And it's not very helpful to us. So in terms of as management, what do we think? Your honest answer. Would we choose for an ex-player to be so critical of the situation at the club at a point in time? No, we wouldn't. Yeah, there were issues, of course, but we know the full issues, and some of those issues involved Glenn, and clearly when he's given an interview, he's not going to go into detail about that. He's going to give one impression, and the one impression is perhaps might be to paint himself and paint other particular group of players in a good light versus other players. Glenn was out of the team. You know that he wasn't in the team towards the end of Mark's period here, and that will clearly have affected Glenn's view, and I think that came out quite loudly in the interview. That said, he did make some substantive comments, which back to the sort of the balance and everything. He exaggerated them, but there's as is often the case with these things. There's no smoke without fire. There's an element of truth there as well.
Caroline at the front.
My question's in relation to the academy. I'm extremely pleased in the last few years a lot more money's been spent on it, not just on the obvious coaches but on all the background, and from that we're obviously getting very good young men to come forward who are capable and good enough to play for the first team. In recent times I'm very intrigued that we seem to have a new feeder club for our academy, Man City.
I wondered where this was going.
Yeah. Which I'm very pleased at, because when they come to the club, they've got very good ball skills. But what I like is when you speak to the young men a month after they've been with Stoke, they're saying being with Stoke is much better, because Man City had criticised them and say what they weren't very good at doing, but they had no help in improving that part. Where at Stoke, they get the help from the coaches and the physios to improve. I was just intrigued why it was Man City.
There's no reason for it to be, frankly, we'll take good players from anywhere, right? Yeah. We've invested a lot of money in the academy. We continue to. Clearly, it feels a bit better now. One or two are starting to come through, and we're at many age groups. We're looking at those age groups and the performances of those age groups against the likes of Man City, etc., are becoming better and better, yeah, and pretty good, yeah. And whereas 10 years ago, even sooner, you were sitting down going, well, who's got a chance? And frankly, there weren't many being put forward. You'll have that conversation now, and you're sitting there and they're going, well, and they're picking out a number, and we're starting to see the fruits of that with a few coming through into the first team, which from a local perspective and from a club perspective is fantastic.
It's cheaper for you.
It's not just the cost of it. There's a certain brilliance in local. I know they're not all local players, but club players who've been through our system who then graduate to the first team. Not only in seeing them do that, and not only in that feeling that it gives them, but also in what it does for the players then in the academy, because they then have aspirational people to look to, and they see a pathway for themselves, and that will only improve us.
The other thing, just going to add, is the ideal is local players who've come through from the age of 7 or 8 all the way through. But take Tyrese, for example, coming in at 16. Harry Souttar's out on loan at Fleetwood at the moment, doing exceptionally well. And the thing about taking them in young, we talked earlier on about balance and about character. The younger a player is, the more opportunity you've got to mould them, to educate them, to work on their character as well. So your risk goes down as well. So the best solution by far is that you develop your players through.
So I'm only 28, so there's still in for
Got Fraser, will you just come back to Paul for me on the front there, and then I'll come to you, Aid, then. Just a quick one from Paul at the front while we were there.
Thanks, Tony. Building on the question from John about Brexit and what Carolyn's been saying about feeder clubs, we've been getting a lot of young lads from Southern Ireland, and also likes of Thibaut and Julian came from Belgium. We've got people from Bosnia, Hungary, etc. Do the same rules apply to players of that young age group that you talked about earlier?
They're even stricter, to be honest, Paul, because the global rule is that you cannot transfer any player under the age of 18. So, that we've been doing it for the EU players because you can do it from age of 16. But, again, if it goes through, if it happens, then we won't be able to get any players under 18, including the Republic.
Aid, are you there?
I just want to know what you're going to do. Get fans' bums back on seats next season with the attendances falling each week.
Well, the answer is the main thing that gets fans bums back on seats is if we're playing entertaining and winning football. We know that. All we can do is guarantee you that the effort's there, the commitment's there, the investment's there, and you hope that the decisions that you've taken. John's talked about Nathan, our faith in Nathan. The recruitment process will be key, but obviously we don't want attendances to decline. We've got season tickets on sale at the moment. We want as many people to buy the season tickets, and remember that. Again, as John said, we had 10 great years. We've had a couple of bad ones, but if we all stick together, we all stay together, and we all carry on working as hard as we can to put it right. It will come right sooner if we're all together.
Go to Malcolm then.
Just a very quick comment to Zig about Brexit. The FA councillors had a very detailed presentation on the various options. Tony may have seen this, I don't know. If anybody here is interested in seeing that, I'll be more than happy to let you have a copy. So it goes into all the stats and things in a great deal of detail. That wasn't my question. My question is that last year we had a first. We had a national campaign jointly between a football authority and the Football Supporters Federation, which was the campaign that we ran with the EFL on the campaign for the alteration in the law to allow the return of standing in the top two divisions in English football. Stoke City so far have been extremely uncommittal over the years on this topic. Now that we have joined the EFL, will the club throw its weight behind the EFL and the Football Supporters Federation campaign to support a change in the law on this?
We've been non-committal, Malcolm, and I think you've taken me by surprise with this question. It's not something that we've talked about for several months. I can't remember the last time, but I think, and I'm saying this at the risk that John might contradict me in a moment, but for me, you have to pick your battles. You have to focus your effort and your workload, and it's not. Frankly, it's not a big priority for us at the moment.
Got one there with Adrian, and then we'll come to the front there after. So, Adrian, yeah?
Yeah, again, not a criticism, gents. We love a highly successful football club at Stoke City. Every single one of us in the room. Now, from my perceived view, when Mark Hughes first started at the club, I think he was incredibly lucky to, inherit a lot of DNA that would run through brick walls for you. If any of the wrong sort of player started playing about, there'd be a hand round his throat or up against the wall. Only metaphorically, but you know what I'm saying. And it's widely regarded that as Mark Hughes sprinkled a little bit of stardust on that basis of a team, your Bojan, your Arnautovic, etc., my God, it clicked. 2-0 at home against Man City on Saturday the 5th of December 2015. We should have won 4 or 5. 6 goals past Liverpool. 4 goals away at Everton. Now, whatever reason, a couple of 3 years into his tenure, if I could diplomatically say, Mark Hughes didn't put all into the job that he could have done. And it could be put very more vociferously. For him to say in May 2012 that him and every one of his team put heart and soul into this football club, when you see the Glenn Johnson interview, although you say, Tony, he did embellish it a bit, makes him look a bit of a fool. That's history now, and it hurts like hell that he did what he did to our beloved football club. Moving forward in a positive light, are there policies, systems and procedures in place? For what it's worth, I don't think you'll ever get that issue with the current manager. That can never, ever happen again, because with a football club of the size and stature, for him to get away with what he did, it breaks my heart, and that's not a criticism. I love my club, and I hope I never bump into Mark Hughes ever again. But moving forward, as lessons been learned, with respect, not a criticism, I love the club, and policies, systems and procedures put in place so that no future manager can ever do that on us again.
I think you're being a bit unfair, Adrian, if I'm honest. When you say what he did, etc., there's an assumption that, for Mark and his team, it was a holiday camp. It wasn't. Yeah, things went wrong. We've talked about it. Things went wrong. Was there a reduction in hunger, which then led to a reduction in the effort that went in? Perhaps. Yeah, you could argue that point. But to say that it was a holiday camp, this is why I say things come out from ex-players through the media, and you have to, you can't accept them as absolute facts. So that. No. I get that. I get that. The one, right, so let's pick on that area really, because the area of discipline and discipline, different managers have different approaches to it, and as a football club we are very manager focused, very manager centric. It's ironic really, because one of the criticisms over a period of time is that we should let the manager have a bigger role in recruitment. Well, in actual fact, as a football club, we probably let the manager have a bigger role in recruitment than 90-odd% of others. But that goes across the board. We are very manager focused. So Mark had a particular approach to discipline, and it served him and served us very well for a long period of time. And then it went wrong. So as a club, yeah, we absolutely have got a disciplinary procedure in place now, which is aside from the manager. Nathan completely buys into it, by the way.
At the front then. Thank you.
Firstly, how do I follow that? I just wanted to ask really, a lot of people will probably be wanting to ask this question. And I understand from a legal standpoint you probably can't go into it in detail. Where do we currently stand on Saido Berahino and his pretty appalling antics, to be fair? It wasn't just the fact of, obviously, what he allegedly did or didn't do. The fact that he did it so publicly in a week when the spotlight of the world was on the club for all the good reasons. And I'll just take the opportunity to say what a fantastic tribute the club, the media team, the city did, the football world did in general. But, where do we stand on Saido at the moment?
You mentioned it in your question, and I thank you for it, that obviously there's legal procedures. I mentioned Adrian a moment ago, we absolutely have a disciplinary procedure in place, and that disciplinary procedure applies to every player, including Saido. So that's as much as I can say, to be honest with you, at the moment. But let me add one other thing, which is away from the legalities of it and all that. The way in which he behaved, we would all, I'm sure, say absolutely unacceptable, and shows this football club in a really poor light because of his association with us. So, we all believe that, but what actually happens as a result, I can't really go into.
Okay, we'll take a few more then. Have we got anybody with hand in air anywhere? Anybody wants to? One on the end. Mark?
Hello, John. How are we?
I'm good.
Right. I know about your knowledge of Nathan Jones prior, but was Mark Cartwright's knowledge and friendship with Nathan Jones instrumental in him coming to the club, with him knowing him and being able to work with him?
No.
No.
It wasn't. It was no.
That's the answer. That's it. Simple. There's your answer, Mark. Anybody else have we got? Gentleman down here, sitting down. Thank you, Aid.
Hello, everyone. Right, first of all, I'd like to say thanks for being so open about actually coming to this. Normally, these events are quite sanitised and you do censor the questions. That means I can get away with what I want to say, right?
We've still got a volume control, though.
Have we?
And just for the record, we never censor questions.
No,
we look through them and categorise them, but we never censor them.
It must. I was at the Agents Do a few weeks ago, and I'm really pleased that there's kids here tonight. Because it's quite. My daughter enjoyed it anyway. But anyway, this is a question to Tony, and I don't really mean to put you on the spot, but I suppose I do. You said in a recent radio interview that we watch players for 25 times. You must have been watching Vimmer since he was 16. And how do you feel about his comments where he said that I'm not worth 10 million? He's recently come out in the press and said that after we paid 18 million for him. And I think everyone knows that. You say about the market value. I do believe in that one. Daniel Levy, he must have some pictures of some Stoke management in serious position because he's done us over so many times.
Well done, John, well done. Let's just leave him there on the end.
He definitely addressed it to you.
I was sat here thinking, good on you, John, taking this question off me. So, I'm trying to sort of go through the order in which you said things. So, yes, I said that and Matt's here somewhere, so I don't know where he is. So I said, yeah. So I said when I was in the studio with Matt, I said typically we will watch a player 25 times. Kevin Vimmer falls within that. I don't know exactly how many times we watched him, but typically we will watch a player, both players we sign and players we don't sign, that number of times. Coming on to his comments. Okay, so I'm going to go back to something I said earlier on as to, when people say things, sort of think about why they might be saying something, what's the rationale. And trying to get a move through at a cheaper price than perhaps, because he's there at the club he's on loan at. What we don't know is whether or not they want him, but what we do know is they certainly won't want to pay a higher fee than they have to. So, and don't get me wrong, we'd probably do the same. You have a quiet word with one of your players, and if he says himself, I'm only worth a couple of bags of chips, then it kind of helps depress the value, doesn't it? Actually, that was a bad choice of example, wasn't it? Yeah.
We'll move on. Where are we going with? Have we got anybody? Fraser 8? No? Front.
Can someone just stop Martin tapping for a moment or two?
He's got a live feed, don't worry about that. Caroline.
Normally at this time of year you would be advertising an end of season do. You haven't done that as yet. Does that mean you're not having one?
Yes, it does mean we're not having one. We decided we're going to change the format of the way we do things. It doesn't mean we're not going to have a dinner of sorts, and we'll be announcing at some time soon. We haven't announced yet, have we? No. We'll be announcing at some point soon as to exactly what that is, but it won't be an end of season awards dinner.
Go on.
So, if you do fan of the year again, it'll be like a table for one and Witherspoons. Is that what I'll do?
We'll make it a table for two, just for you. Fraser's got one over there, I think.
Question for both of you, really. Given the Kevin Vimmer situation, the story about Glenn Johnson and Bula, would you say that the much vaunted process is actually flawed? And if it is flawed, who's kind of to blame for that flaw, and should that be sorted out now?
I'm not sure. I think if you look at any football club, and I'm not saying we've got everything right, because I can go through even the, if I go through Bournemouth, yeah, Brighton, yeah, I can go through some of their bigger signings, and and I'm not going to call out players and say that I don't think they're any good, but I can go through each football club and go, I'm not sure about that, yeah.
Just as a side,
yeah.
Somebody like Chelsea, anybody who searched for 2 minutes on Google could have realised that player wasn't suitable for this club.
And then you're into sort of, obviously you take somebody like Esse, and I'm not disagreeing with you, yeah, but you take somebody like Esse who's got undoubted ability, yeah, and then you're into the realms of you're really listening to them. Well, to be fair, you're listening to your manager there, and some managers will have an assessment and a belief in themselves as to whether they think they can deal with a player or not, and they don't always get that right. Yeah.
Last question. Yeah. Have you quantified this? Because you stated about transfers, you can quantify that, so you can work out how many transfers have been successful, how many have been unsuccessful, and quantify it. You stated Bournemouth as a figure. Have you quantified it though? Do you know percentages?
Well, you would be doing that subjectively, because what I might think is a success might another person might not a success. Do we assess those sorts of things? Yes. Yeah, we absolutely do. Now, of course, we may disagree on the criteria used, yeah, and so there's an element of subjectivity in it, yeah. But yes, we absolutely look at those things, yeah, and we absolutely look to learn from those things, 100%. Don't forget, we as a business that not as in the main. Not the main business, you know what I mean. We are built on analytics. Yeah, we are built on. No, I am. What I said, and I think I was just throwing clubs. I was using Bournemouth as an example as a club that's done well. Yeah, done well, and I'm making the point that, I've got it with me actually. I'm making the point, if I go down some of their bigger transfers, yeah, I can make an assessment of a certain percentage of not being successful, which might be higher than you expect. That doesn't mean Bournemouth are bad at doing transfers. Bournemouth are doing fantastically well. I'm kind of using them as an example because they have done well. Yeah, does that make sense? Yeah.
Thank you, John. Right, we got a couple more to take before we get ourselves wrapped up this evening. Anybody got any burning questions left?
What about the disabled footballer?
I think we've already done that one, haven't we?
Sorry, I've got a question. First, a statement. I want to thank the club and the company and the family for the respect and the care that they showed to Gordon Banks' passing. We're all fans in the room, and the way that you included the fans with the beanbag and everything like that, I think it showed the world how well, I say, the club, the company and the family approach things. So well done on that. Now, down to silverware. The last significant silverware that the club won was the 2017 Euro Cup. The Swiss weren't very keen to let you take the original one. What happened with the replica? Did you ever order it, or... I mean, Paul Ruane might know, but I'm not sure.
I've got it sent home. Anyone help me out on this?
He's got it.
Well, you've got your answer there, haven't you? No idea.
Just on one of the points you mentioned there, what I would like to say, look, I do look. We've had a bad 2 years on the football field, and I'm deeply sorry about that, and we will do everything we can to make that right. Yeah. What I would say is that doesn't mean everything the football club has done during that period has been bad. Yeah. I look around and I see Adrian on the community side. Some of the stuff we're doing in the community is excellent. It is excellent, and throughout football, it's acknowledged as being excellent. I look at some of the work Paul, Fraser, Anthony are doing. There's a lot of good stuff going at the football club. Yes, we've had a bad few years. I look on the property side. The stuff Richard's done is excellent. There's a lot of good people here, and a lot of diligent, hard-working people who are absolutely committed to doing everything within their power to make it successful again. And they've actually done their parts really, really well. Clearly, I absolutely understand we are a football club, and therefore we've got to get the first team right as well.
Thank you, John. I think we'll take that one there, last one there, I think we'll take you.
This is to both Tony and John Coates. We've just been briefly talking about Mbula, Vimmer, and of course we've got Badu and Dai. Are their performances at the moment being monitored by the club with a view to where we take them or go forward with them next year?
Their performances, we literally have a game-by-game report on them. Yes. Yeah, so every single game I personally get a report every week on each one of them. On every lone player, so the good ones as well,
Ladies and gentlemen, I'll assure you'll agree with me that we're very, very thankful that both John and Tony could join us here this evening. They were very honest, frank Q&A session. I hope we've been able to answer a few of those questions for you this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, let's have a round of applause. Chief Executive and Vice Chairman, John and Tony.